We have 5 Pirates of the Caribbean films, so let's rank them. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a good one today. I'm the movie ranker, and today I'm ranking all 5 Pirates of the Caribbean films from worst to best. Now, I'm no expert in this franchise. I haven't seen most of these movies before. These were pretty much all first-time watches, aside from the original, which it's been like 15 years since I watched it. So this was real fun to go through these movies. I always heard about them, and I actually enjoyed them all for the most part. Yeah, sure, there's some that's less good than others, but I don't think there's any dumpster fires or anything here. They're all enjoyable enough. So without wasting any more time, let's get into my ranking. Coming in the last place, at number 5, I have On Stranger Tides. I just couldn't get into this one, guys. I was bored to death. There is some interesting things in here, but for the most part, I found this the weakest story out of the 5 films, where they're in search for the Fountain of Youth. And the whole thing just feels kind of like a spin-off instead of taking place in like the main world, especially no Elizabeth, no Will Turner, those type of things. And I just found the story to be pretty predictable. For instance, like the very end scene where they have the 2 goblets and Blackbeard and his daughter end up switching them, where she survives and he doesn't. You see it coming a mile away, and there's other things in this film that are set up that you know where they're going. We got Penelope Cruz in here as Jack Sparrow's ex-girlfriend. She does a great job acting wise, but the character itself, I find she's just very forgettable to me. Like, not a whole lot of redeeming qualities to her aside from her looks. And Blackbeard, he's just kind of a generic villain, even though he's so hyped up as, oh, he's one of the baddest pirates there is, but he's not that much different than the rest of them, to be all honest. Except he has a sword that kind of controls his ship and that, and he can turn other people's ships into little ships into bottles. But yeah, he's okay, played by Ian McShane, I think his name is, the dude from John Wick movies. He's fine as an actor again, but the character, left very little to be desired. And Barbossa working with the British, wearing that wig and that, thought that was just dumb and way too silly for me. I understand he has alternative motives, but yeah, when I first seen that, I'm like, oh my god, they're going in that direction. But I have to admit, I absolutely loved the whole mermaid attack scene. That is great. It's pretty vicious. I just love the way it looked and the way it was shot. Looks really cool. And the whole, was it Philip, the religious guy, how he forms a relationship with one of the mermaids. I like that whole aspect of the film. They're probably 2 of my favorite characters in here aside from Jack, but everything else is kind of meh. Up next at number 4, I got Dead Men Tell No Tales, or Salazar's Revenge. It has a few different titles, this one, but it is the last entry in the franchise. Came out in 2017, maybe a little too late, but I've always heard this was so bad, so terrible, but it's not all that bad. I actually enjoyed it for the most part. We got like the Spanish crew of the undead out for revenge on Jack for locking them into the Devil's Triangle or whatever and being cursed. I thought they're great. I just wish they were fleshed out a little bit more, but yeah, they're really ruthless and, killing all these pirates. They make for great villains, in my opinion. I also like how we get like a younger Jack in here at one part where it shows how he put this curse on the Spaniards. Just very cool to see a little bit of backstory on Jack, a little flashback scene. We never really got that in this series, and I enjoyed it. I think Karina, the astronomer, I think she's a great character, a great original character, who eventually we find out to be Barbossa's daughter. There's one thing about this franchise. Every movie seems to introduce a new son or daughter or relative of one of these characters. It's like, okay, let it rest. But I do really enjoy her. I think she brings a lot of charisma and that to her role. On the other hand, Will's son Henry, I think he is terrible. I hate that character. Yeah, not a fan of him. And Jack Sparrow himself is like borderline annoying in here. I'm pretty sure Johnny Depp was drunk half the time they're filming this. It seems like it anyway. Always staggering around in that. Like, he eases a little too over the top for me in this one. And they bring back Will and Elizabeth, but they're basically mere cameos in here. Will gets maybe 2-3 minutes of screen time, and Elizabeth, she doesn't even get a word in. She just shows up at the very end. It's like, come on. It's either have them in the movie and be important or just don't have them at all. And the action is just a bit too over the top and silly for me. Like the whole bank heist, like when they're robbing the vault and they end up taking the whole building with them and the building's going down streets and streets. I'm like, as if it's just too much for me. Or when Jack is trying to escape from the Spanish and he's jumping like from one ship to the other on the cannons, and I'm just like, all the logic and realism that was there before is completely gone out the window. And there's also some pretty big plot holes and stuff in here too. Like the whole way they find the trident of Poseidon, they have to use the stars. That's where Karina comes in. But she literally just follows the straight line of stars and they eventually find the island. I'm like, as if no one has ever found this island before, or like it just seemed kind of dumb to me. And finally, the CGI does look pretty horrendous, especially with the undead. Like, for instance, there's like a bird with pieces missing of him and his legs missing, but his foot's still there. And it's just like an empty space, just like a pirate missing like his arm, but his hand would be floating. And it just looks dumb to me. And how do these movies get worse with their CGI as they go? You'd think they'd be getting better over time, right? But not the case. Like I said, a lot of people would have this in last place, and I understand that, but I just enjoyed the story and the villains in this one a bit more than the one I had in last place. And I still had a decent time with this movie. I understand it has problems and flaws, but it's entertaining enough. Up next, at number 3, I got At World's End. I debated for a while putting this one in number 2, but I ultimately had to place it in number 3. But I do think that it got great pacing. I mean, this is almost 3 hours long, and that had me worried looking at the runtime. I'm like, but you know what? It kind of flew by. I really enjoyed the flow of the film. It never felt dull or boring, and this wrapped up the original trilogy quite nicely. I'm not the biggest fan of Will in this film, but I do like how he got that arc, how his storyline kind of wraps up, him being the captain of the Flying Dutchman in the end. I think that was nice, being with his father and that on the ship. Even though he's cursed, it felt like a right ending. And I didn't really see it coming because you're thinking, is Jack gonna be the new captain? Like, you never really knew who was gonna stab Davy Jones and, you know, rip out their own heart. You were never really sure who. It was kind of unpredictable. Was it gonna be Barbossa or Jack? But it was nice that it turned out to be Will. I thought, like I said, it wrapped up his storyline quite well. And it was cool to see Elizabeth become a captain and a pirate lord of the Singapore crew, and then eventually being the pirate king near the end. That's all great. I like how she kept diving like deeper and deeper into this pirate life. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of how her storyline wraps up. She just kind of goes back to living a normal life. I think she should have stuck as a badass pirate, you know? Honestly, the biggest problems I have with this movie are all in the last act. The movie had potential to be great, but there's a lot of flaws and problems in that third act. One being Calypso. For one thing, having her be that voodoo lady from the swamp, how that was revealed, kind of seemed out of nowhere, and there was no real build up to that. I just didn't like that reveal. And when you do get that final act and you figure, oh yeah, she's going to be a badass, she's becoming a goddess again, leaving her human form. But no, she doesn't do much. She makes like this whirlpool and some stormy clouds, and that's it. We never hear from her again. And I'm like, what? We got Will and Elizabeth getting married during a whole fight scene. It's just dumb. Like, why would you do that in that moment? It's like, maybe they thought they were going to die or whatever, but it just came off as goofy, cheesy. You got Barbossa as like the priest. I'm just like, dumb. You got Beckett, head over the British, the main villain for the last movie as well, and he goes out just being stunned and getting shot at by both sides, and I'm like, what a weak, underwhelming ending to a lot of these characters. Like I said, this movie had potential. If it would have wrapped up things a bit better and handled the action in that in the third act a little bit better, this one would have definitely been in second place for me. But no, they really dropped the ball. Up next at number 2, I got Dead Man's Chest. Now, this one had a pretty interesting story. I like how we find out more about Jack's past. We find out that he actually made a deal with the devil, or in this case, Davy Jones, and his time is up. Now he has to either die or serve the Flying Dutchman for 1,000 years or whatever. I thought that's all great how he gets the black mark on him from Bootstrap Bill. We finally get to meet him as well. He's talked about so much in the original. It's cool to finally see him. I think Davy Jones is a great villain with an interesting story. You know, how he had this love life like with Calypso and that all turned, and he ended up going mad and becoming this creature, and not following his duties of the Flying Dutchman. That's all super interesting to me. And his look, the CGI looks pretty good for the time again. We got like part octopus, part crab, like all that shit. It looks great. His crew, I wish they were done a little bit better. They look kind of generic, just like whatever. I wasn't a fan of the look of his crew, but he does look great. They spent a lot of time on him, and he's played by Bill Nye, and you can see the facial expressions through the CGI. You can still tell that this is Bill Nye portraying this character, and I love that. I like that we get to see Will and Bootstrap Bill, his father, finally meet, and that whole game they play with the dice on the against Davy Jones is so great. I don't understand the game at all. I was confused by the outcome and what was going on, but it was still fun to watch nonetheless. It was almost like a poker game in a Bond film or whatever. It just really had me engaged. And Elizabeth slowly becoming a pirate was really fun to watch too. Cut her hair, and you know she's joining the crew. It's a little dumb how she tricks some of the other sailors into thinking that there's like a witch on the ship or something, and she even like calls out a few times like, look over there, and they don't realize it's a girl's voice. All that was pretty dumb to me, but I still had fun watching her, and I was surprised to see Norrington in this one, the villain from the first movie, the British guy. How he lost his job, and he's like all depraved now and that, but he's kind of trying to play both sides to come out on top again and get back in with the Navy. I thought that was really cool, and I just didn't expect to see him back in this film after you see the new head baddie for the British, Beckett. And he's an even bigger dickhead than Norrington. I didn't think it was possible, but yeah, you hate his guts and you want to see Beckett die as soon as possible. But this movie does have a few pacing issues. There's this whole scene where it takes like a half an hour of the movie where they're on this island with this like cannibal tribe, and it really has nothing to do with the main story. I feel like they made the movie and the producers and that said, we need some more entertainment in there. We need some more laughs, more goofiness. So I feel like they added that in after. That's what it feels like watching it anyway. I personally think the movie would be stronger if you remove that whole island scene. It has no need to be there aside from a few cheap laughs, honestly, in my opinion. Yes, it was fun to watch, seeing Jack Sparrow as like their king, but also being in a bad position where they want to also burn him on the fire. But like I said, it just took me out of the story. Like there was no need for it to be there. And this being the middle part of a trilogy, it doesn't really end nicely. It kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and it had me going, "What? That's how you're ending this film?" It's okay now that we have our trilogy, or you know, our whole saga. But at the time when this came out, I imagine that must have been pretty disappointing. Being like, "You're gonna leave us like that?" It felt like the end of an episode of a TV series, and come back next week to find out what happens. But in this case, it was like, come back next year. Just didn't enjoy that at all. It doesn't make for a great standalone film. It works better when you're watching it throughout the trilogy because of that. And the whole resurrecting Barbossa at the end kind of had me scratching my head. I'm like, what? It just makes everybody too safe. If you can just resurrect anybody who died in this franchise, who cares if they die? You could just bring them back. I understand they couldn't bring back Jack because he was in Davy Jones' locker at World's End. He was basically in purgatory or whatever. But everyone else you can bring back, so it's like, what's the point? But for me, easily coming in the first place, I gotta give it to Curse of the Black Pearl. Man, one of the best live action Disney movies ever made, in my opinion. It's perfectly crafted. You got great casting here. Obviously, Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow. couldn't see anybody else playing the character at this point, and he nailed it right from the first film, to his movements, to his dialogue. It's all so perfect and unique, and yeah, I just can't see anybody else playing him. Of course, we got Keira Knightley as Elizabeth, childhood crush there. But yeah, she's obviously beautiful and she plays the part really well. And you got her counterpart Will, the blacksmith. You get a familiar love story there between her and him, which is played by Orlando Bloom. You know, two different walks of life, two different hierarchies. One, you know, the governor's daughter and a blacksmith. Not normally a couple that you would see together, right? But like I said, we've seen this in other movies, but they just write it really well. We get massive set pieces which look awesome. The action is always moving. When you get two people fighting, they're like, you know, running down the walls and going downstairs and jumping over stuff. They're not just standing still, so it keeps the action exciting and thrilling. The story is tight, unique. It's never a dull moment. We get great pacing. Every minute is used wisely in this film. Barbossa and his crew make for great villains. We understand their motives. We understand where they're coming from. So that always makes for a better villain. And their look when they go into the moonlight and you see them as skeletons, as the dead, looks so freaking good. This is 2003 and it has, I'd say, the best CGI in the entire franchise. CGI just been going downhill over the years. I don't know why, but it looks best in 2003 in this film. And I just love how we learn about our characters through scenarios they get themselves in and when they meet people. Like, for instance, Jack. We don't know a whole lot about Jack Sparrow. Right from the start, they kind of throw this character at us, but you know, his interactions with people he met from the past, from getting slapped in the face by women or him being seen as a legend by other pirates, and that it's just so interesting and really gets you involved with the story and the character. Unlike the sequels, the humor lands every time. There's really no wasted jokes or nothing in here. I feel like all the sequels kind of get out of hand with their humor and it doesn't always land, but this time it works all the time. And the world building is just so rich and beautifully crafted. There's just so many memorable scenes, from all the sword battles to where they put Jack back on the island for the second time. It's so funny. And you find out how he actually escapes. He doesn't use sea turtles. There was a whole rum run that used to happen on that island, and all these little things is just so interesting and engaging. It kept me invested from start to finish. And this movie totally holds up. Like I said, I had this movie on VHS when it came out. Used to watch it quite a bit within the first few years of its release, but I haven't seen it for like 15 years, but it's just as good as ever. It's near perfection in my mind, and it easily comes in the first place in this franchise. So there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 5 Pirates of the Caribbean films. Like I stated, these were mostly all first time watches for me, so don't get too hung up on my ranking if it looks out of whack or whatever. Maybe you guys been watching this franchise for 20 years now, so obviously it could change over time on rewatches and such. They're always talking about a new one coming out, but it just never seems to happen. It always gets stuck in development hell, or it gets canceled. I know there was one with Margot Robbie supposed to happen, but besides the point, I hope you guys enjoyed this ranking. You can go check out my Letterboxd. Link to that is in the description if you want to see my other lists, my other ratings. Please drop your rankings in the comment section below, your favorite, your least favorite. We'll have a great discussion. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.